kayak fishing sucks. There, I said it. But what's interesting is that many of the things people hate about kayak fishing are the exact same reasons many of us absolutely love it. So let's talk about 14 reasons kayak fishing sucks and why that might not actually be a bad thing. Number 1. Loading and unloading. A lot of people picture kayak fishing as simply grabbing a kayak and heading to the water. And in reality, some of these fishing kayaks weigh over 100 pounds. And that's before you add the battery and the fish finders and all the tackle, and the rods and everything else we convince ourselves that we need. And by the time you're fully rigged, you're moving a small battleship. And depending on your setup, you might be lifting it into a truck or strapping it to a roof rack or dragging it across the parking lot or rolling it down a muddy bank before you even make your first cast. But here's the upside. You don't have to get one of these giant kayaks, right? You can get a smaller one, a lightweight one, and that extra effort's going to give you that access. You don't need a boat ramp, you don't need a marina, you don't need to pay those boat ramp fees, and you definitely don't need a 100-pound kayak, right? You can launch in places bass boats can't even dream of getting into. Some of my best fishing days have happened because I was willing to put in a little extra work to reach water nobody else was fishing.
That's what I'm talking about, bro.
Number 2, they're expensive. One of the biggest myths in fishing is that kayak fishing is cheap. Now, can you get into it for a few $100? Sure. Will most of you stay there? Probably not, because it's happened to me and I've seen it happen to thousands of others, right? You start with a kayak. I started with a Sun Dolphin or Aruba 10, and then you want a better seat, and then you want a fish finder, and then you want a crate, and then you want rod holders, and then a motor. And of course, you're gonna need a battery, and then another battery, because apparently one isn't enough. And before long, you've got several thousands of dollars floating around with you on the water. But here's the positive. Unlike a traditional boat, right, the ongoing costs are relatively low. You don't got any fuel bills, no winterization, no expensive engine repairs, no wondering why the check engine light came up after your last trip. And as one former boat owner told me, my favorite thing about kayak fishing is pedaling right past the fuel dock. Now, there's also the flip side, right? Some of you actually have self-control and can keep it on a budget. I salute you. Number 3, wind sucks. If you fish long enough, you've had that day. You make that perfect cast, the wind turns your kayak, you make another cast, now you're facing the wrong direction. You spend more time repositioning than actually fishing. And for many kayak anglers, wind is public enemy number 1. But here's the upside. Wind is actually one of the best fish positioning tools on the planet, right? Wind's gonna push that bait. Bait attracts bass. Bass get predictable. And once you learn how fish relate to windy conditions, you might actually start looking forward to windy days instead of fearing them. But at the end of the day, when that wind starts pushing 15, 20, 25 miles per hour, a lot of people, as they should, are calling it quits. And honestly, I don't blame them. I've been there. Number 4, limited range. Let's be honest, if you're fishing a 70,000 acre body of water, you're not seeing it all from a kayak. You have to be intentional about where you launch and how far you are willing to travel. And if you choose poorly, half your day can disappear getting from point A to point B. But here's the positive, right? Limited range forces kayak anglers to do their homework. When you're in a bass boat, you can get to any part of the lake with the turn of a key and 70 miles per hour, right? It's easy to tell yourself you'll figure it out once you get out there. Kayak anglers, we really don't have that luxury. Before we ever hit the water, we're studying maps, we're looking at that satellite imagery, we're researching launch locations, right? And developing a game plan around the areas we want to fish. And more often than not, that preparation, that leads to better days on the water because we're fishing with intention instead of just running around looking for something to happen. And sometimes the biggest lesson kayak fishing really teaches all of us is that there can be fish everywhere, not just at that one waypoint. Number 5, boat traffic sucks. Wake boats, jet skis, the guy pulling 3 teenagers on a tube at Mach 5, right? Some lakes can feel more like an amusement park than a fishing destination. And when you're sitting inches above the water, every wake feels a lot bigger. But here's the positive. Most kayak anglers eventually learn that some of the best fishing exists away from all of that chaos, right? Small lakes, electric only lakes, you got those creeks these kayaks can get up in really easily. You got those backwaters that not a lot of the boats are in. There's no wake zones. These can be some of the best places on earth to catch giant ditch pickles. Number 6, storage can be a pain. right? A fishing kayak doesn't seem that big when you're shopping for one. Then it arrives, and suddenly you're staring at a 10 to 14 foot plastic boat, wondering where exactly this thing is supposed to live. Garages get really tight. Apartments become a challenge, and leaving it outside year round really isn't that ideal. But here's the flip side. Once you figure out that storage solution, you're still spending far less than many boat owners spend on marina slips and storage lots or rental spaces, right? So there's also ways to get creative, right? I know in my garage, I built a lift system, right? That'll hold 2 heavy kayaks. So if you're interested in that video, I'll throw it at the end. But also, I'll be honest with you, I bought a barn to store some of them as well. So now all of my kayaks just got a little more expensive. Number 7, it takes work, right? Kayak fishing is going to require some effort. Paddling takes effort, loading and unloading takes effort, pedaling takes effort. Even standing and casting all day takes more energy than people realize. And if you're looking for the absolute easiest way to fish, kayak fishing probably isn't it. But here's the positive. A lot of us actually need that movement. I spend plenty of time sitting behind a computer, editing videos and answering emails. Getting out and moving while fishing is actually one of the reasons I love it so much. Everything doesn't have to be about convenience. Number 8, it slows you down. When I first got into kayak fishing, this was probably the biggest adjustment, right? In a boat, I fish a spot, fire up the engine, head to the next one. All right, and before long, I found myself spending more time traveling than actually fishing. But in a kayak, everything happens at a slower pace. But here's the positive. Slower often means better, right? You pay more attention, you fish more carefully, you start noticing little details that most anglers miss because they're in such a hurry to get somewhere else. And here's another advantage that doesn't get talked about enough, right? Stealth. In a boat, you often motor right into an area, creating noise, vibration, disturbance before you even make that first cast. And trust me, the fish, especially the big ones, know something just rolled into town. In a kayak, you're quietly fishing your way into a spot. Instead of running to a waypoint and then starting to fish, you're making casts the entire time. And a lot of the times, our lure will enter a bass's neighborhood way before they know we are actually there. I have caught a lot of fish on my way to the next spot. Most anglers are simply driving over fish, trying to get the fish. Kayak anglers, we're often catching them along the way. Number 9, getting in and out of a boat can be sketchy, right? Most people worry about flipping in deep water. The reality, most mishaps happen near the shore. You got launching, you got landing, you got stepping on the docks, you got getting out into steep banks, trying to enter your kayak while standing ankle deep in mud, right? And that's where balance matters most. In fact, some of the most common kayak fishing injuries happen before an angler ever makes their first cast. One bad step on a slippery boat ramp or trying to rush getting into your kayak can quickly turn a fishing trip into a bad day.
It's fun.
But here's the positive. Once you learn proper entry and exit techniques, your confidence increases dramatically. Like anything else in kayak fishing, it's a skill. The more you do it, the more natural it's going to become. And after a while, getting in and out of your kayak becomes second nature, and you'll wonder why it even felt intimidating in the first place. Number 10, stuff gets tangled, right? Fishing line finds everything. Rod tips find something, anchor ropes find hooks, nets find treble hooks. It's like everything on your kayak is actively trying to become connected, right? And if you're new to kayak fishing, there's really a good chance your first few trips are going to feel a little chaotic, right? You make a first cast and you catch the rod behind you. You grab your net and somehow hook 3 other things in the process. And you wonder why everyone seems to have their setup dialed in while yours feels like a floating yard sale. But here's the positive. Over time, you start developing your own systems. You learn where your rods need to go. You figure out where to store your net. You find out which accessories help you and which ones really just get in the way. Now, I'll be honest with you, it's gonna take a few trips out, but eventually everything starts to have a home and a purpose. And once you dial in your setup, kayak fishing becomes much more efficient and much more enjoyable. Number 11, you're always fighting something, right? You're either fighting the wind, which I've been doing today. I'm back in the cove because the main lake has a lot of wind. You're fighting current, you're fighting rain, you're fighting the heat, you're fighting the cold. You're fighting boat wakes and floating grass and mud. Kayak fishing always seems to give you another obstacle to overcome. And just when you think you've got everything figured out, right, the lake throws something else at you. The wind picks up, the weather changes, the conditions aren't what you expected them to be. And unlike a boat, you can't always just hit the throttle and solve the problem. But here is the positive. Those challenges I believe they make you a better angler. You learn how fish react to changing conditions, right? You learn how to adapt. You learn how to stay in the game when things aren't perfect. And that right there, that is what's going to make victories so rewarding. Nobody remembers the easy days, right? You remember the days when conditions were tough, you had to grind for every bite, and somehow you figured it out anyways. Number 12 is going to be, you can't bring everything, right? And this is a little bit weird one because it depends on where you're coming from. If you're a bank angler, a fishing kayak feels like a massive upgrade, right? Instead of carrying everything on your back, you suddenly got room for multiple rods, you got your tackle trays, you know, your fish finder, you can bring a cooler, and all kinds of gear that would have been a pain to haul down to the shoreline. But if you're coming from a John boat or a bass boat, it can feel like a downgrade in space, right? A lot of boat anglers are used to having 20 rods on the deck, enough tackle to open a bait shop, right? And every lure they ever purchased somewhere in a compartment. That does not happen in a kayak. You are forced to make decisions before you leave the house. Which rods are gonna make it? Which techniques am I actually going to throw today? What conditions am I expecting? What tackle do I truly need? But here's the positive. It makes you a much more intentional angler, right? Instead of bringing everything you own and hoping you'll figure it out on the water, you're forced to develop a plan before you ever launch. You study the lake. You think through the season. You identify likely patterns. And because you've committed to a game plan, you often spend more time fishing and less time digging through your tackle, trying to decide what to throw next. In a weird way, having less space often leads to better decisions. And better decisions, well, let's be honest, they just lead to more fish. The next one, you become freaking obsessed, right? This might be the biggest problem of all. You buy your first kayak thinking it'll be a simple hobby. And the next thing you know, you're watching kayak reviews at midnight, right? You're comparing accessories, arguing about hull designs online, and trying to convince your spouse why a third kayak is absolutely necessary. But here's the positive, you will join one of the most passionate communities in fishing. You'll make friends, you'll create memories, and you'll collect fishing stories you'll be talking about for years. Because for all the reasons kayak fishing sucks, it's still one of the most rewarding ways to catch a fish. And that's why we keep coming back. So let me know in the comments, right? What is the thing that sucks most about kayak fishing for you? And why do you still do it? Number 14, people are just simply afraid of it, right? For a lot of people, the biggest reason kayak fishing sucks is they're scared of it. They're worried about falling out. They're worried about flipping over. They're worried about getting tangled in fishing line. They're worried about being stranded. They're worried about cold water, right? They're worried about sharing the water with bigger boats. And honestly, those fears aren't completely irrational. Kayak fishing absolutely comes with risk, right? Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. The problem is that most people either underestimate those risks or let those fears keep them from ever getting started. But here's the positive, almost every one of those risks can be dramatically reduced with the right knowledge and preparation. And that's actually one of the reasons Chad Hoover and I created KFAST, Kayak Fishing Advanced Safety Training. KFAST is an online safety certification designed specifically for kayak anglers, right? We cover things like PFDs, weather, hazards, cold water, re-entry, situational awareness, and the mistakes that get kayak anglers, well, get them into trouble. The goal isn't to scare people away from kayak fishing. The goal is to give you the confidence and knowledge to enjoy it safely. So head over to kfast.co, get certified today. Now, if you're wondering what some of those dangers are, you might want to watch the next video, 16 kayak fishing mistakes that can get you killed, and another one the YouTube algorithm thinks you're going to love. Thanks for watching, guys. See you out there in the water.